Good morning, everyone. Good morning. A couple people still streaming in, but I figured I would get started. My name is Grace Novacek. I'm a summit leader with SIFPAC. I contributed to the planning of the 17th annual Chicago Food Justice Summit organized by the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. And SIFPAC is an organization that co-develops, facilitates, advocates for, and supports implementation of policies that advance food justice and food sovereignty in Chicago and across the region. This is the community storytelling session, writing a memoir of community, solidarity, and care to reimagine food justice with Francia. Before we get started, I just want to give people a little heads up. For accessibility reasons, there is closed captioning. In order, we have a couple more people streaming in, sorry. So for those of you just joining, hi, I'm Grace, I'm with SIFPAC. This is the community storytelling session. To access the closed captioning for this session, you can click the 3 dots in the menu below where it says more, selecting live transcript and then hitting the enable button. So yeah, welcome everyone. Once the session is, we're going to get started here in a second, and once the session is finished, we hope that you'll join us on the virtual event platform for the rest of the events today. So yeah, to get things started, I will pass it over to Francia.
Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining. Today we will be writing a memoir of community, solidarity, and care to reimagine food justice. My name is Francia Garcia, and just to get started and get everyone in the mood for a story, we are going to start. So I am going to share a story with you. So get cozy, get comfortable. We are gonna do some story sharing. "11 years ago, I learned that a seed is a vessel. When you think about it, a seed is a vessel of life. And as a seed transforms from seed to plant, to fruit or vegetable, it does not only nurture people, but it also nourishes everything around them. You see, I did not always know this. In fact, I am sure many people living in the apartment buildings surrounding the park at Calle Durango and Calle Orizaba did not know this either. Stuck in the daily routines of working and commuting in one of the most populated cities in the world, many people forget where their food comes from. Until one Sunday, around 12 small tents pop up in this Mexico City park and display an array of colors, textures, and smells. Fresh fruits, vegetables, and grains are stocked on the tables. After months of working to obtain a permit, Mercado El Cien has created a new space for people to shop for locally and ethically produced food. And as neighbors roam around the market, they also meet the people who grew their food. This is where I met Abel and his wife Emma, who shared their love for their land and also shared the challenges of getting a seed to become a beautiful crop that could feed others and sustain their own livelihoods. Despite Mexico's weather and abundance of natural resources, farmers do not always have easy growing seasons. Abel and Emma were no exception. Even with the challenges, they showed up every Sunday morning with a truck loaded with different seasonal and native produce, introducing me to herbs, fruits, and roots I had never tried before. Abel used to say they all came from the same place. The seeds they planted, the seeds that their ancestors planted, the seeds that kept bearing life beyond their lifetime. You see, a seed is a vessel. It is a vessel of life. If I didn't share that story, I could have just said, in 2011, I visited Mercado del Cien, the first ecological, local, and fair trade farmers market in Mexico, and I met Abel, a farmer. But I want to ask you, which one do you find more compelling? And feel free to drop your answers in the chat or anything.
I think the second one is so much more compelling. When you add so much more detail, it just becomes a much more rich narrative, and you can start to picture yourself actually there at the mercado.
Yes. So that is the power of stories. And, oh, sorry. That is why we are here today. The idea of this workshop is that today you will use your voice to share what solidarity, community, and collective care look like for you. And we'll do that through stories. The ultimate goal is to create and publish a zine of the 17th Chicago Food Justice Summit, where we will be sharing our stories and connecting other people to the humans who are advocating, creating, and promoting initiatives to advance food justice. So this will be a very hands-on workshop, and I hope by the end of it, we can get a little draft of a story that eventually we will publish. There will be a link to submit it as well. And there will be 2 more sessions where we'll keep working on these stories if you want to come and join us. And I'll give a little bit more information of that in the end. Just wanted to share that with you for now. So before we get started, I just wanted to share some community agreements, and hopefully we can all agree on them. Any feedback, any comments are appreciated. Just to make sure that we're in a safe, creative space where we recognize that everyone's story is equally important and that we appreciate everyone's diversity of ideas, truths, values, and beliefs. We are encouraging everyone to use their authentic voice and to know that there are no rights or wrongs in storytelling. Your creativity and self-expression is totally, totally welcomed and encouraged. And we recognize that we can all learn from each other. I am here to guide you, but I am not the only person who knows everything, and anyone can contribute and help us learn. So having said that, it is time to get creative and write your stories. And for these, I would say, if you have a piece of paper, if you have your laptop and you just want to open up a Word document or a Google Drive, whatever you want to do, that would be great. So just to remember, our theme for our stories is going to be once upon a time, or in 2021, or in 2020, or just yesterday. We showed up for each other in the name of food justice, and our stories will be revolving about that. So like I said, community, solidarity, collective care, what does it look like? And just to get started, we are going to talk about your ideas. So right now, I would like all of you to think about someone in your community or a project, an organization that is doing some really amazing work, a friend or a neighbor. You can also think of someone who always shows up for their community, a neighbor who came up with a solution during the pandemic, or your own work. Think of the people you have met in the summit as well. I know there's pretty amazing folks here that are doing amazing work, and I am sure you will find stories there. Once you think about it, you'll pick one story and write it down as it comes to your mind, whether it's a title, a sentence, or a short paragraph that describes that main story idea. And I'll give you 5 minutes to start thinking on that and writing about it so we can start building your story. And if anyone has any questions at this point, feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask. I am here to help and we're all here to help each other. Welcome. If you're just joining, we have started our workshop about telling stories of community solidarity and collective care. Right now, we are giving everyone 5 minutes so they can start thinking of one story they want to write about, writing down the idea or typing it in their devices. And we are open for questions as well. Stephanie is asking if we can include some fictitious elements or if these stories should be based on all real events. You can do either or. You can base it off a real event and add some fiction elements, or you could even do like a total fiction story, reimagining what, food justice looks like or what collective care looks like. So feel free to do either or you can even include some metaphors in your stories if you're doing a real story as well that could draw into fiction without being necessarily fiction. As like Enrique said, yes, magical realism in the story. How's everyone doing with their ideas? Good. Just for the sake of time, I would like to stick to the 5 minutes. I'll give people just a couple minutes, extra minutes to write their stories or the idea stories. And if you finish writing your idea story as a paragraph, a title, or a short sentence, you can also now start thinking of the deeper meaning of your story And that is going to be in the backbone of your story. Don't worry about it. We'll come back later. But you can now think, if you want your intention of the story to talk about community or solidarity or care, or is this a story about one person changing the world? You don't need to go deep into it. You can just write it down as a note to yourself. This will be a good reminder for you to stay grounded on how you go about your story moving forward. And with that, I will move on to our next step. But if anyone has any questions, I am happy to answer them at the end of the workshop as well, or if anyone feels like they need to catch up a little bit. So now we are going to identify the basic elements to your story, and we're doing this in a very, very simple manner. You'll see it now. We are going to answer the questions what, who, why, what for, when, and how. And you can just write the answers as they come to your mind. We are going to think about these as tools and resources to nurture your seed, which is your story idea. And this will all be elements that will help build your story. So we will have 10 minutes to do this because I know it's a little bit more complex, and there are some questions below each main question that can help you think about what you want to write down. After you're done writing it, if you get a chance, pause and look elsewhere and then read it again and add more details. Details are what make the story really, really rich and interesting, and what help us transform and transport ourselves to a certain scene or location outside the story we're reading. So details will be key. And I have a little example there that you can read, which was similar to the story we shared in the beginning, just how adding more details and more words can help us paint a picture or create a scene. And again, if you have questions or comments, you can drop them in the chat or go off mute and ask directly. We will have 10 minutes for this activity. I see we have some new folks joining us. So just to catch up really quick, we are in a community storytelling workshop. We started writing stories about community solidarity and collective care to reimagine food justice. So at this moment, we're inviting every individual to start writing a story idea and adding the elements that will make their stories. So what you can see on the screen is what we're working on right now. People will have around 5 more minutes to work on these. So if you can get started on that, you can just start now by writing your story idea, thinking of anyone that inspires you, anyone that is doing amazing work in terms of food justice or your own work, and then write that down. And then you can write the answers to the questions: who, what, when, why, what for, and how. How's everyone doing? We have about 3 more minutes. Do you think that's enough? You can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so if everyone's good to go, we are going to keep moving along and continue building our stories. And what comes next is that we are going to start building the story and actually giving it a structure. So think about it in terms of scenes like you would typically see in a movie. There is a sequence of scenes or a sequence of events, and you are going to try to give them an order. And to do this, there are several options. There is no right or wrong. Typically, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they follow that order, but that's not the exclusive order, and that's not the best order. It's about what works for your story. So what's important is that we want to keep the story flowing, which means we want to have events happening so that it doesn't feel like we're just static. And then we want something interesting or exciting or moving to happen within the story. So you have a couple of options. You can start in the beginning and say what happened there, and then ask yourself, and what happened after? And after that, what else happened until you reach the end? Or you can start right at the end and then go backtracking and find, okay, what happened right before I reached the end? And before that, what needed to happen? And how did it all start? Or a third option is you can start with the moment where a major change occurred or a major solution came to someone's mind or was implemented, or just a person transformed. And then you can go back to how it all started. Tell us what happened that drew them to that major moment, that major transformation, that major change. Add more details of what else was needed to get there, and then go back to the moment of the major change. And this would be kind of making a circle. You'll go back, you'll start somewhere and go back to where you started in the end. So these are some of the options that you can use to start building your stories and giving them a sequence. So again, for this activity, we will have 8 minutes, and I just want you to know, like, there is no right or wrong. So at this time, you can just start thinking of the sequence and writing it down, and we can always reorder or work with it later. And again, the floor is open for questions. The chat is open for questions. Or if you want to share how you're doing, how your story's coming along, that would be great too. How is everyone doing? Does anyone have any questions or any struggles that they want to share? We can all help with that too. That is a good question, Makala, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. There is no length limit to the stories. I would say 500 to 1,000 words, and 1,000 might be a stretch because that might be too long. But if you want to really write a detailed story and like incorporate a lot of characters and scenes, that's what might work for you. 500 typically makes for a short story that's compelling. And given that we're limited in time, that's where you might be at, and that's totally fine. I'll give everyone one more minute and then we'll keep moving along just in the sake of time. But as I mentioned, there will be a few more open sessions where everyone can come and keep collaborating on this in the next couple weeks. So don't feel like you have to have it ready by the end of this session today. Okay, and with that, I hope that you are feeling confident with your stories. You're starting to see them shaped and you're starting to see them come to life. And we are going to read your story. So the secret that no one tells you, but it's very true about storytelling, is that you don't get a great story at the first time you write it. Hopefully you do, and maybe really talented and experienced people do. But the secret to a great story is reading it and reading it and reading it again, and thinking of what it makes you feel and how it moves you, and if there's something interesting, if the story moves along nicely so that you want to keep reading and it doesn't feel like something you want to put down and do something else. So typically for these compelling movements, story writers say that's the moment of conflict. I don't necessarily love that word just because it doesn't always have to be a conflict. It can just be a transformation. And I think that's just a more positive word. So we are going to call it transformation in this workshop. And usually when that happens, the moment when that transformation occurs within a story is referred to as the climax of your story, or like the moment where things turn, reach their peak, and then they keep moving along. So I am going to ask everyone to read their stories and identify if you have that transformative moment there. And if you don't have it, ask yourself, was there a challenge or an unanticipated and unexpected event? Was there a difficulty or just a big change that we want to include in the story? And write it down somewhere in your document. Just write it down so that you can incorporate it and decide where it goes. And I'll just give everyone a couple minutes to do this. It should be there, and if it's not, don't worry, we'll get it there. But just to analyze our stories and make them even richer. And how are you all doing? Do you need a couple more minutes? Are we okay? How's everyone feeling? Oh, Kenneth, I see you're far from a completed story. No problem at all. You have all the basic elements, I hope, by now, so we can keep working on it, and there will be some opportunities to do so. But also, I write some stories, you know, I'm a storyteller, and I can tell you I never feel like it's ready. So don't worry about it just yet. Yes, so I'll be sharing some self-editing tips in our next slide, but just to give anyone who needs them ahead of time, you can start reading it again, and it's gonna sound very obvious and repetitive, but start reading it again and do a basic grammar and spelling check right now. If anything sounds weird or doesn't seem like it's coming along clearly, mark it up, highlight it. Don't worry about correcting it yet. Okay. I will move on to the next slide, but you can keep working on your stories where you at. I just want to share a few more tips before we wrap up, and give you more information about how we will continue to get these stories published for the scene of the 17th Annual Chicago Food Justice Summit. So these are some of the self-editing tips. You will have to read your story multiple times, probably until you get sick of it, to get it to a great, rich story. So like I said, a basic grammar and spelling check will always help. And as you do that, if you find anything where you're like, I'm not sure that's being stated very clearly, just mark that up, highlight it, circle it, and then come back to it later. Take a little break and then reread it so you can have a fresh mind and a fresh set of eyes when you look at it, and you can rewrite it or correct it. And if you like something, you really, really like something, and you don't want to remove it, you're just thinking of how can it be worded differently, don't delete it, just write below it. So you're always keeping those portions that you really love, and we don't lose them in the making of different versions and editing. So by now, hopefully, we would all have a very good draft. And we are thinking of it as a little seedling. We had a seed, now we have a little seedling. And the secret for making it a beautiful plant is to keep reading your story again and again, and finding those areas where you can add more details or make something more clear, or add more excitement and share more about the characters so we can see them as a person with 3 dimensions. You know, like a real person is not perfect. Sometimes they'll have flaws, sometimes they'll have little quirks. So the more you can incorporate that kind of detail, the better your story will be in connecting others and making them feel part of it. And to keep working at it until it becomes a beautiful plant, we are giving folks an option to keep working on them. We will have 2 open online sessions on Friday, March 3rd and March 11th, where you can join if you want to, and we can keep working on your stories, and we could share them all, hear what everyone's writing about, see how they're coming along, or you can keep working on them on your own and then submit to the consent form that Grace shared on the link. And at the end of March, we will be publishing them all in a little scene that will be available, I believe, online and in print. Is that right, Grace? Yes, so we will have an online and print version of the scenes if you share your stories, and we have those options as well to keep working on them. And with that, I also want you to know how much I appreciate that you're here, that you're sharing your stories and taking some time to write with me. We can keep working on it, sharing knowledge, and the idea is that the more knowledge we share through stories, the stronger our community will be. So join our session next Friday. All you need is your story draft or a story idea, and we can start from scratch. And in the meantime, there is my contact information. You can reach me through email, or you can reach me through Instagram, and I am happy to help meet one-on-one or just chat and connect. Yes, we can share I see some questions on the chat. We can share the consent form. Once you sign up in the consent form, then you can get the invitation to the next sessions. And Ezra, I see that you wanted me to share the last slide. Was that this one with the dates?
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Francia. Lovely presentation. One more link is that in Socio, the event hosting platform, we are asking people to complete a little survey about how this session went for you. So if y'all don't mind, I just dropped the Socio link in the chat. It should take a couple of minutes, just how you're feeling about it. That would be really helpful for us. And of course, the consent form again, which I'll pop in the chat one more time for everybody. It'd be awesome to see all your work in print and online in a zine. And it's a work in progress, so no pressure to have it finalized and perfect before you fill out the consent form. So yeah.
Thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful. I see some comments that it was, so I'm really glad. And I hope that this inspires you to keep writing stories about anything, because it is really fun and we really need to hear more people's stories.
Thank you. That was a great experience.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Francia, it's going to be this same Zoom room.
Okay.
So actually, I'm going to stop the recording.